This is the Anycubic Photon M7 Pro, and it's fast. In fact, it's the fastest printer I've ever used, full stop. But this printer is much more complicated than that, and unfortunately it's not all good. Fair warning, for good chunks of this printing process I may well have been a little bit hangry. Just saying. We'll talk about that later, but if you're considering buying this printer, here's what you need to know. It prints great models. It's got a massive vat, and it's got an inbuilt heater, but it's a little weird. Now there are a lot of features to talk about on this printer, so let's just start with the basics. The printer costs £499. That includes all the usual basic tools, along with a resin autofill system and a USB air purifier. Nice. The printer dimensions are 310 by 315 by 520 millimeters. But you're going to want to leave some room above the printer to remove that lid, as well as have somewhere to put it when you aren't using it. The body is metal, solid, weighty, and has rubber feet so it's really stable on your bench. On the outside of the printer on the back, there's a Wi-Fi antenna, a power socket, and a switch, which is the correct place for those sort of items. There's also a port for an extractor system too, but I haven't used that yet. On the side is a USB port, and finally on the front is a large screen, which I have thoughts about, so I'm going to come back to, as well as, thank you very much, a power switch. Seriously, every manufacturer should be putting a power switch on the front of their printers. The printer not only looks good with sleek lines and no fussy graphics, but it's ergonomic too. Anycubic got this right. With the lid off, the most obvious thing is the huge new vat. It's made from metal and it's deep enough to hold over a litre of resin without being over full, which is really useful for larger projects. The large block at the back is a heater, a cool new system which pumps resin around the vat using channels that are pre-cut. This system really works, as you can see here, but I also have thoughts about that too, so keep watching. Underneath the vat is a 14K screen, which is just 208 pixels wider than the M5S Pro's screen at 13,320 by 5,120. So, not 14K. You can see the pressure sensitive elements here too, which help the printer stay level and detect objects, all of which worked when I was testing. Moving up the machine, you get to a single lead screw, which some folks claim is not as good as a ball screw, although honestly I'm not sure why. Scratch that, I did some digging and I found out. Basically, both lead and ball screws are absolutely fine for 3D printers, they've just got slightly different properties. Lead screws are generally cheaper to make and use a little nylon sleeve to change the direction from a rotary force into a vertical force. They're typically quieter and they can self-lock. Ball screws are a little bit more complicated, which makes them more expensive to use. They use a ball bearing to transfer motion from the x-axis to the y-axis, but they do have the advantage of reducing friction and the disadvantage of being louder. You tend to find ball screws in more industrial applications where extra precision and lower friction is required. So now you know. At the top of that screw is a much bigger screw, identical to that on the M5S, and from that hangs a large etched metal plate, much like you see in other printers these days, and various screws to tighten it if you ever need to. And you should hope you never have to do that, because as soon as you do your first print, they'll fill with resin and become impossible to clean from then on. The rest of the plate is super simple though. And while that means it's easy to clean, compared to plates like the GK2 or the Hay gears, it does kind of feel like a step backwards. So that's the basics. Let's talk about the more interesting bits. And fair warning, I do get a little bit grumpy here. Luckily this week's sponsor arrived just in the nick of time. In order to fund some of the cost of the videos, I tried to find relevant sponsors, and this one is an absolute banger. HelloFresh lets you pick from over 50 different meal options and then delivers them to your door. The box contains your meal choices and each of those is portioned up with a recipe card. The best bit is it doesn't matter which box you choose, all the recipes taste amazing. Today I'm cooking Thai green curry. It costs just £4 a portion and takes less than 20 minutes to make it. No really. And best of all though, I don't have to think about it. I've been using HelloFresh for literally years, and as I'm a little bit mean, I like to save up all the recipe cards and then try and convince other people I can cook using their recipes, even when I'm not getting a subscription to the boxes. So if you're a busy grown-up, I think you'll really enjoy HelloFresh. All you have to do is click the link in the description or use my code and get 10 free meals plus free appetizers for life. One appetizer item per box while the subscription is active if you're in the US. Outside the US, the local discounts apply. Thanks so much to HelloFresh for sponsoring the video. Without people like you, I couldn't afford to make the videos that I want to do on YouTube. Oh, and if you're new, hi, I'm James. This is Rising Game Minis, and on this channel, we like to talk about inspiring hobby tech with the occasional funny side quest. So far so good. It's a well-made printer, packed full of features. It looks great, it's lightning quick, and it prints great models. I don't think I've ever been more frustrated when using a printer. Yeah, let's unpack that. Once the printer is on your desk, your first task is to set it up. Now the screen is responsive and large enough to type out easily, and the UI is simple enough, if a little oddly laid out. But as with all menus, once you know where things are, it's easy to get where you want, with just a few button presses. But my standout memory is installing the app. Good grief, that's a miserable process. Scan a QR code, create an account, verify the account, it doesn't work, go back, reset, blah 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 blah. We've all been here a million times. All to get access to the app, which honestly isn't even essential anyway. I used it once, then just added the files to the printer using a USB stick after that. When cloud systems are done right, they really enhance the process. But when they're done badly, they just create another source of pain and frustration. And sadly, it doesn't stop there. The next step with any printer is to dial in the resin. This is a normal step for any resin printer, unless it's the Hey Gears where the presets just work. And I was looking forward to using the RERF function. Anycubic pioneered this, and I've loved using Elegoo's recent implementation of it, and I had big hopes. Sadly though, I actually found it really tricky to work out what to do. I was expecting a RERF function on the printer, but nope, it's actually a file that comes preloaded, which is fine, but it's not exactly clear how that works. You just have to know somehow. Now, eventually I worked it out from watching YouTube videos and playing around with the settings. And hands up, I may be an idiot, but you don't know what you don't know. Also, the instructions with the printer say you're explicitly not allowed to change this file or change the file structure, which made me panic a little bit and wonder what I was doing, but actually that's complete nonsense, and you absolutely can just upload whatever model you like in your slicing software, lay it out into a nice little grid of 8, and then just change the title to the same file structure that's preloaded on the printer, and it works just fine. So, don't know what they're talking about there. This is another little minor peeve of mine. As far as I'm concerned, instructions should make your life easier. They shouldn't require prior knowledge to know how the instructions work, otherwise it kind of defeats the point. And in this case, it just left me with a bad feeling and feeling less confident in the product right from the start, which isn't ideal. If you're a beginner, it's hard enough to dive into 3D printing without putting silly barriers in the way. It's kind of sad to say, but I just want tools to work. My hobby is painting miniatures, not tinkering with 3D printers. Maybe that's lazy, but there it is. I don't know, do you share the same opinion? Let me know down below. Now, once you've worked it out, it's actually pretty simple to do. But as I've said, I'm a bit of a pleb when it comes to tech. So hopefully you'll indulge me as I show you my stumbles and flaws here. I could easily just have edited all of these out of the video and made it look like I was a complete professional and knew exactly what I was doing, and I just used the printer to make amazing models so I could sell you more printers. But as far as I'm concerned, that's not the point. I want to give you an honest experience. So eventually I had some files. I filled the vat with Anycubic grey tough resin, and I ran off a series of exposure tests from 0.25 seconds to 4 seconds. I picked a number that looked about the best and then ran off my first print, and it just wasn't perfect. We'll get to the main model in a second, but for some reason, and yes, the printer was level, and yes, it would be nice to have something inbuilt into the machine to check that, but the first print spilled resin, dripped resin all over the front of the vat and all down the inside of the vat too, which is really irritating. In fairness, the printer never did this again. So maybe it only happens when the vat's fuller, or perhaps I knocked it while I was printing. I'm not quite sure, and I could never replicate this again, but just so you know. And the model, well, only half of it printed. And what did print was crazy overexposed, despite me setting the exposure to 2.5 seconds, which should have worked fine. I mean, I was clearly doing something wrong here, I just couldn't work out what. And so I tried again with lower exposure. But first I had to clean out the vat, which I did using the exposure cleaning setting, which gave me instructions to use a scraper. Now, I don't normally do this, but I wanted to follow the instructions and do what the printer said, but I couldn't make that work. So I did what I always did and removed the vat, which is a pain in the backside because the vat is weird and heavy and awkward. And so I pushed out one corner to release the resin film at the bottom and remove it. I started the print again, and it failed again, in a different way. This time I gave up, left it overnight and came back to it the next day, and discovered that the cover is not fully UV shielding, so the resin left on the plate hardened on and had to be chipped off, and the resin had a film over it. Perfect. At least this gave me a chance to clean out the resin vat, and I have to say, while I don't love it as a system, I'm not really a fan of anything that adds extra steps. I do love the innovation. You start off as usual. You empty the vat into a funnel via a sieve and then wipe it all down. But because the heater system has a little pump inside it, you need to clean out that bit too. And here's where it gets a bit clever. Inside the heater is a pump. So you fill up your vat with 200ml of IPA and then use the flush function on the printer, which just circulates that IPA around all those tubes and channels and flushes them through. You do that until it's clean. How can you tell if it's clean? Well, honestly, you can't. You just have to sort of trust the process, which I don't like, but there it is. Like I say, I'm not a fan of the execution, but I'm a fan of the idea behind it. In my opinion, a simple vat heater underneath the vat itself is the best option I've seen so far, or just a little add-on heater you can put into the printer chamber itself. Or, even better, make the printer £100 cheaper and just remove the heater option completely and have it on as an add-on accessory. Just an idea. Talking about accessories I would take out, I'd bin the air purifier. Nice idea, but it doesn't fit, it looks cheap, and the size of the carbon filters inside it mean it will be useless in seconds. Same for the resin pump. Honestly, I didn't use it. I don't want even more stuff to clean, and I can pour in resin when I need to. And thanks to the massive vat, I don't often need to do even that, which is awesome. Thanks, Anycubic. So next time you're packaging up these printers, well, I appreciate the effort. Take all the fluff and just make the printer cheaper. Oh, and then I set it up and it failed again. And at this point I was pretty frustrated. I just wanted to sort of lay out how frustrating this is, because at the end of the day I want to buy a tool. I don't want a project. I don't want another hobby really, I'm busy enough. What I want is a tool. And what I want is my tool to just work straight out of the box. I don't really want to have to mess around with calibration settings. I don't really want to have to mess around with dialing in resin prints and all the rest of it. I get that's part of the process, but the recent crop of printers have sort of lulled me into a false sense of security that that might not be a thing anymore, and here we are, back to square one. This doesn't really feel like a next-gen printer, more like a previous-gen printer with a couple of hastily added on features. I really wanted to love this, and yet here we are. So after 3 fails, I swapped to my favourite, most reliable resin, Wargamer. A resin that, despite being very expensive, is also pretty forgiving, and I've printed a lot with. I dialed it in, and it failed again. And at this point, I was pretty frustrated. I came close to finishing the whole review here, but I persevered, and I'm really glad I did. One more clean down, one more resin, Anycubic Fast this time, and some default settings later, and we have some successful prints. Hooray! Not only were they successful, but they were crazy fast. On my Hey-Gaze with a pulse release and on the Mars 5 Ultra with its fancy tilt release, they were both slower. And the M7 Pro was blazingly fast, which is just some sort of miracle. Now, I'm not normally one to get too excited about the speed of printers. I generally sort of run my prints overnight, so how long they take doesn't matter, and I'm generally chasing detail too. But if you can get detail and speed, well, why not? Now, I should say the fast settings on this printer use 100nm layer heights, which is half the detail of the sort of mini painting standard you see of 50nm. So when you look up close, you can absolutely see the layer lines. So I printed these models again at 50nm, and they're still faster and they still look great. So all is forgiven, kind of. It's been a bit of a trial of fire, this video, and I personally think that's worth a like, so I'll just give you a few seconds to do that. Genuinely though, I'd love to know your thoughts on this printer. It's been a bit of a wild ride for me, and I want to know what your takeaway is. I mean, do you prefer speed at any cost? Do you prefer detail on minis? Do you not care about the features? What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. So the conclusion. Do I recommend this printer? For beginners? No. There are simpler machines to get started on that are more intuitive at a lower price point. I stand by former Angry Me's assessment that the Anycubic Photon M7 Pro feels a bit rushed. It feels like they had loads of cool features and they were just in a really great development space, and then the Saturn IV Ultra launched and they had to rush it all out to market. And they might be right, but unfortunately the printer suffered as a result. There are some genuine next-gen features in here. The speed of the printer and the heaters, but there's also some features that feel previous gen, like the plate, like the roof, like the lid, and still others I would just leave out completely, like the air purifier and the resin pump. However, if you're a little bit more experienced, I do recommend this printer. With some experience and some time, you can really dial this in and generate some incredible looking models, and better than that, you can do it faster than all your friends. So if speed's a thing for you, this printer is blazingly quick. And at less than 500 quid, it's a great price too. And I would also add that if you find yourself just using one brand of resin, or you want to make use of that resin pump, then this thing adds even more value at that point. So I'll leave it to you if you think it's worth it or not. And if you do, I'll pop a code down below, and if you click that code, Anycubic know that honest reviews like this one actually work for them as a company, and I get a little bit of a kickback too, which is appreciated. I've got some really cool reviews coming up on the channel in the next few months, so make sure you subscribe. But to close out, I just want to thank my incredible group of people over on my Discord server, particularly those who go the extra mile and support me on Patreon. It genuinely means the world to me, so thank you so much. You know who you are. If you want to join in the fun, I'll pop the links down below. And all that's left to say is thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.